One day, when we had all but lost hope and ever attaining mythic enlightenment, we heard the rumbling of a powerful motorcycle which came to a screeching halt in front of the house. Then we heard the vigorous steps of someone walking up to our little meditation room. There entered a large young man with broad shoulders, muscular arms, and blonde hair. He was dressed in red leather and stopped in front of the master and addressed him insolently with a thick American accent. You deserted our monastery because you think you're so superior with your slanted eyes. You think the truth needs a Japanese passport, yet I, a despicable Westerner, have solved all the cones, and I'm here to prove it. Question me. We disciples were frozen in place, as if we were in a cowboy film in which one gunslinger challenges another to see who has the fastest draw. Ijo, however, was unperturbed. I accept, he said. And then a scene began to unfold that had us gaping in wonder. For me, as for the others, koans were unsolvable mysteries. Whenever we read them in books, we understand absolutely nothing. We knew that in Japan, monks sometimes meditated on these riddles for years or decades. Questions such as, what is Buddha nature? And answers such as, the cypress tree in the garden, had led us to despair ever understanding them. Zen does not seek philosophical explanations, but rather demands immediate understanding beyond words. The cypress tree in the garden left us disconcerted, revealing that we understood nothing because we were not enlightened. On one occasion, when I confessed my perplexity to Ijo, he replied brusquely, "Intellectual, learn to die." This is why it was such a deep shock to see this aggressive, disrespectful, arrogant young man reply rapidly with no hesitation to my master's questions. Ijo clapped his hands. That is the sound of two hands clapping. What is the sound of one hand clapping? The young man sat down with crossed legs, straightened his back, and raised his right arm wordlessly with his palm open. Good, Ijo said. Now, if you can hear the sound of one hand, prove it. Still silent, the youth repeated the gesture. Good, Ijo said again. My heart was pounding like a drum. I realized that I was witnessing something extraordinary. Only once before had I felt this particular kind of intensity, when I saw the great bullfighter El Cordobés decide to provoke the bull by freezing like a statue. The animal charged several times, his horns passing within a fraction of an inch of the man's body, yet he was never gored. A strange vortex of energy seemed to envelop both man and beast, plunging him into an enchanted space-time, a place where error was impossible. Confidently and with perfect style, this invader responded to every challenge presented by my master. There was no such an intensity between the two men that we disciples began to dissolve little by little into the shadows. Ijo asked him, when you have turned into ashes, how will you hear yourself? Again, the youth stretched out his hand. Then Ijo said, It is possible that this one hand could be cut off by the sword of sumo, which is the sharpest of all swords. With a smug expression, the visitor answered, "If it is possible, show me that you can do it." Ijo insisted, "Why can't the sumo sword cut off his hand?" The youth smiled, "Because this hand reaches through the whole universe." Ijo rose, came close to the visitor's face, and said loudly, "What is this one hand?" The man answered, shouting even louder, "It is the sky, the earth, man, woman, you, me, the grass, the trees, motorcycles, and roast chickens. All things are this one hand." Ijo now murmured very softly, "If you hear the sound of one hand, make me hear it too." The young man arose, slapped Ijo in the face, and sat down. The sound this made was like a rifle shot to us. We were on the verge of jumping this insolent youth and giving him a sound thrashing, but the master restrained us with a smile. He asked the young man, "Now that you have heard the sound of one hand clapping, what are you going to do?" The visitor answered, "Ride my motorcycle, smoke a joint, and take a piss." In an urgent voice, the master commanded him, "Imitate this sublime sound of one hand clapping." The youth imitated the sound of a truck that happened to be passing in the street at that moment. Vroom. The monk let out a deep sigh. Then he asked him, "This one hand, how far can it travel?" The youth leaned over and pressed his hand on the floor. "It can go no farther than this." Ijo Takata burst into laughter, and in an astounding gesture that left no room for ambiguity, he offered his place to the visitor. The latter, assuming the air of a proud winner, sat down in the master's place. "You have done very well in resolving this cone. It was first posed by Hakun Ikaku." Here the youth interrupted the master, demonstrating his erudition. "Yes, Hakun, the great Japanese Zen monk, born in 1686 and died in 1769. Ijo bowed respectfully. Then he continued, "Now that you have demonstrated the perfection of your enlightenment, I request that you explain the significance of your gestures and words to my disciples, who are most intrigued by them. Can you do this?" "Of course I can, Master Peter," for this was how he now wished us to address him, replied proudly. "When this monk asked me to prove that I have heard the sound of one hand clapping, I swept away any rationalization with a gesture meaning, 'It is what it is.' When he asked me if I was going to be a Buddha, to become enlightened, I did not fall into the dualistic trap of enlightenment, non-enlightenment. What nonsense! My outstretched hand says, 'Unity is here, And now, as for when I have become ashes, I do not fall into the trap of existence, non-existence. If I am here and now. That is all. The concept of after death exists only when we are alive. As for the sumo sword that cuts everything, I reply that this is nothing to be cut. Why can this one hand not be cut? Because it fills the universe, illuminating all distinction. When he had asked that I had made him hear the sound of one hand clapping, I slapped him to show that he should not underestimate his own understanding of the cone. And I knew he was setting a trap for me when he asked me to imitate the sublime sound of one hand clapping. Expecting some extraordinary experience is an obstacle on the path to enlightenment. By imitating an extraordinary sound that occurred at the moment, I was showing him that there is no difference between ordinary and extraordinary. As for the question of what I am going to do now that I am enlightened, I simply gave some details of my everyday actions. There is no need for future plans regarding enlightenment. We must understand that we have always been enlightened without realizing it. He also tried to trip me up with the question, how far can this hand go? Enlightenment, however, is not located in space. Well satisfied with his own words, Master Peter now tapped his own belly, exclaiming with a proud, authoritative tone, "Here, only here, and nowhere else but here." Faced with such obvious arrogance and vanity, we were hoping that Ijo would now expel this American from his place. We were all appalled at the prospect of having to accept this character as a teacher, but Ijo did nothing. He simply sat there as if he had now become a disciple. Smiling, he said to Master Peter, "In Hakuin's teachings, there are two koans that are more important than the others. You have resolved the first of these with perfection. Now I'd like to see if you can resolve the second." "Of course," the American interrupted with a smug expression. "You mean the question about the nature of a dog?" "Yes, the question to which Joshu gave the answer." Again, Peter interrupted, reciting with speed and precision. "Joshu, the central figure of Chinese Zen, born in 778 CE, while still very young, he began to study with Master Nansen. When Nansen died, Joshu was 57 years old. He remained in the monastery for 3 more years, honoring the memory of his master. Then he left in a quest for truth. He traveled for 20 years. At the age of 80, he settled in his native village in the province of Zhou. There he taught only until his death at the age of 100. "What an amazing erudition," Ijo explained. Then, looking in our direction, he ordered us, "Applaud!" I joined my companions, but I was applauding with a feeling of jealousy. Master Peter stood up and bowed to us in return with several ostentatious flourishes. "Now let us see," Ijo continued. A monk asked Master Joshu, "Does a dog have Buddha nature?" Joshu answered, "Moo." "What do you say?" Peter began to stand up, muttering. "Moo in Chinese means no. It means non-existence, emptiness. It might as well be a tree, a barking dog, whatever. Now standing and facing Ijo Takada, he yelled so loudly that the windows shook. Moo! Then began another round of the duel of questions and answers. Give me the proof of this moo. Moo! If that is so, then how will you awaken? Moo! Very well, now when you have been cremated, what will become of this moo? Moo! The gringo yells were growing louder, yet Takada, by contrast, was questioning him in a tone that was more and more gentle and respectful. Little by little, he seemed to abase himself utterly before this exalted being who always found the right answer instantly. I was afraid that the dialogue might continue on this way for hours, but now a subtle change took place. The responses were becoming longer. On another occasion, when Joshu was asked if a dog had Buddha nature, he answered yes. What do you think of that? Even if Joshu said that a dog was Buddha nature, it would simply yell moo with all my strength. Very good. Now tell me, how does your enlightenment act with moo? Peter stood up and walked a few paces, saying, When I walk, I walk. Then sitting down again, he said, When I sit, I sit. Excellent. Now explain the difference between the state of moo and the state of ignorance. I got on my motorcycle and rode to Reforma Boulevard. Then I walked to the government palace. Then I walked back to Reforma, got on my motorcycle, and rode it here. This response baffled us all. The gringo looked at us with a disdainful air. Your Japanese monk has just asked me to explain the difference between enlightenment and non-enlightenment. In my description of a walk that began in one place and returned to that same place, I was refuting the distinction between the sacred and the profane. Grudgingly, we felt compelled to admire the cleverness of this response. Very good indeed, Ijo said, beaming with a smile that seemed full of admiration. Now, what is the origin of moo? There is neither sky, nor earth, nor mountains, nor rivers, nor trees, nor plants, nor apples, nor pears. There is nothing, neither myself nor anyone else. Even these words are nothing, moo. This last moo was so loud that some dogs in the neighborhood began barking. From this moment on, the pace of the dialogue began to accelerate. So give me your moo. Take it, Peter said, handing Takada a marijuana cigarette. How tall is your moo? I am 5 feet inches tall. Tell me your moo in the way that is so simple that a baby could understand it and put it into practice. Peter hummed, as if lulling an infant to sleep. What is the difference between moo and all? If you are all, I am moo. If you are moo, I am all. Show me different moos. Intellectual. Learn to die. When I eat, when I drink, when I smoke, when I have sex, when I sleep, when I dance, when I'm cold, when I'm warm, when I shit, when a bird sings, when a dog barks, moo, 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 moo. His shouts went on, becoming deafening. Now he had lost control and he was really causing a scene. He seemed like a man possessed, as if he would go on with this mad yelling indefinitely. With a single bound, Ijo leaped up, seized his flat Zen stick, Kyosaku, and hurling an impression cry of Kwatsu, He began to strike Peter. Outraged at this, Peter attacked Ijo, resorting deftly to some judo technique, an attainment he had never mentioned to us. The master immediately caught Peter in a hold and flipped him expertly to the floor. When Peter was gasping on his back with his four limbs flailing in the air, Ijo Takata placed a foot on his neck, immobilizing him. Now let us see if your enlightenment is stronger than fire. Dragging the bewildered gringo outside forcefully, he snatched a kerosene lamp on the way. Then, where two of these lamps always handy, well as a number of candles because we often had electrical failures in the neighborhood. Outside, before the eyes of the terrified visitor lying on the ground, Ijo emptied the lamp kerosene all over his motorcycle. Then he held up a lighter with a flame burning. The gringo cried out, "No, no, no," but when he tried to get up, Ijo knocked him down with an expert kick to the chest, landing him on his back. Calm yourself. Here is a koan especially for you. Enlightenment or motorcycle. If you reply enlightenment, I'll set the motorcycle on fire. If you reply motorcycle, I'll allow you to leave on it. But before you do, you must give me that book when I know you have memorized. Master Peter seemed but a crumbled heap now. He whined softly, motorcycle. Then he rose slowly and opened the storage compartment at the back of his machine. He pulled out a book with a red cover and handed it silently to the man who reassumed his role as our true master. Ijo read the title aloud. The sound of one hand clapping, 281 cones and their solutions. Then he sternly admonished and defeated one. Your trickster, learn to be what you are. You trickster, learn to be what you are. The visitor's face was now the same color as the book and his leather clothes. He kneeled before the monk, prostrated himself with his hands outstretched upon the ground, and implored him humbly, I beg you, my master. With his flat stick, Master Ijo struck him 3 times on the left shoulder blade, then 3 times on the right. The 6 slaps on the leather were as loud as gunshots, and Ijo stretched out an open hand in a gesture. The American stood up. He seemed to have learned an essential lesson. He sighed, "Thank you, Sensei." Then he cranked up his powerful motorcycle and rode away forever, the sound vanishing in the distance.